So no doubt that the industry, hospitality, is relieved about this. I guess the question mark hangs over how long can it last?
Well, our view has always been to have a measured and proportionate response as cases occur, and we've had to keep that balance. And yes, we need a strong health response, but a strong economic response too. And I think if you look at Sydney, as Luke just said, if you look at Sydney today, traffic's coming back, the city's, I think, thriving again, and that's a very positive thing. But the changes we're making will add around $75 million a week to the New South Wales economy, and I think restaurants and cafes right across the city and state, we're very pleased with today's announcement.
I guess anxiety does start to emerge when you start seeing these cases build once more in Melbourne. What sort of concerns do you have about that?
Well, look, it's a concern, but we've got to be balanced about this and have a perspective. There are going to be, over the course of this year and into the future, cases occur. There will be outbreaks from time to time, but we've got to have a measured response to that. And we've invested a significant amount in our state on our health response. I think our tracking and tracing teams here are probably the best in the world, and they get on top of it very quickly. But we can't just keep going into lockdown every single time there's a few cases, because the downstream impacts on businesses and confidence across the board will potentially be more severe than the problem we're trying to tackle.
So are you preparing to declare a hotspot anytime soon when it comes to that outbreak in Greater Melbourne?
No, not at all. And I think I have confidence they'll get it under control, but there are going to be cases. If we have returning Australians coming home, and the hotel quarantine system has been very, very positive, particularly for our state. I think around 80% of cases that have occurred in New South Wales have occurred in hotel quarantine. But there are going to be outbreaks, and we need to ensure that we have a measured response as they occurred over the course of this year.
The Victorian Premier this week did say Victoria has higher standards than in New South Wales. No doubt that's being tested now. I see you smarting. How's that, Dave?
Well, I welcome that from Daniel, and I'd say that he should take more returning Australians, because currently in New South Wales we're taking the highest amount of returning Australians. 40% of those are from other states, and yes, we want to act in the national interest, but at the same time we are penalised when it comes to international students. We can't bring back international students, which is a significant part of the New South Wales economy. It's our second largest service export. So I think we need to have a balanced approach, and I wish him well with his strong quarantine, and if it's going so well, I look forward to him taking more people.
Does it irritate you, those sorts of comments, when New South Wales has done so well here? It's and many people have said this, it's the benchmark. New South Wales is the benchmark, and that's a credit to you guys.
Well, that probably irritates them, and I think it's only natural in a federation that we're going to have banter between various states, and we take different perspectives from time to time. But ultimately, everyone wants every state to do well. And I think so far, if you look at the way that our country is operated under a federated model compared to anywhere else in the world, we've got to be pretty pleased with where we stand today.
Okay, Luke Mangan, we just talked about this. He was on the show a little bit earlier. I know you've had discussions with him over in the past. Is there any plans to help the city further going forward? I know you've got the cards coming out, the vouchers coming out for people in New South Wales, but I was reading a stat last night from PricewaterhouseCoopers. It said the CBD in Sydney and other cities around the country are having these issues as well. 28% capacity in Sydney CBD at the moment, and those kind of low numbers may well continue for the next 2 to 3 years. So are they your numbers as well? Is that what you're looking at, and what can you do about that? Because that is a worry.
Yeah, Pete, there is no doubt that there's certain areas that as we go through this year and following years, that will be more impacted as a result of this virus. And just being down in the Rocks yesterday, where we launched that Dine and Discover voucher, these are areas of Sydney that rely on international tourism. Now, that provides an opportunity to innovate, and I think a place like that really should be attractive to locals to come and visit as well. And so I think there can be some silver lining out of this. But we'll continue to work with small businesses, because we want to get as many through this difficult time as possible. They're the lifeblood of our economy. And that's why, if you look at what we've done in the lead up to this pandemic and some of the changes we made last year, we've increased our payroll tax threshold. We've had the lowest payroll tax rate, headline rate in the nation.
Would you increase that further? Is that a possibility?
Very, very much open to doing that. When businesses go well, there's a family behind every single one of them, and the more cash flow they can have to invest, to employ, to keep people on, that's going to be the mark of success going forward. And if I look at where we sit today, confidence is higher than we would have expected. The consumer sentiment numbers that came out this week were very strong for New South Wales. And so, but beneath all of that are small businesses who are doing it tough, and we want to help them get through.
What about fringe benefits tax? Does the federal government need to look at giving that a holiday for the next couple of years in the hospitality sector?
Well, let's see how we go. I mean, it's very easy for me to call on the federal government to do things, and probably don't want to get a call from Josh in about 10 minutes. But look, I think they've got levers at their end. We have ours, and we will deploy those to help as many businesses get through. I've always said, from our state's perspective, we're going to prioritise the economy over the budget, and that is clearly focused on stimulating economic and job growth in this state.
Okay, well still on the federal treasurer then, the Queensland Premier, as you're aware, that asked for federal help, assistance when it comes to the tourism sector, particularly when JobKeeper ends at the end of next month. What do you want from the federal government? What extra help do you need post-March?
I've always wanted the opportunity, I think, for support from the federal government to help states reform to drive economic growth. That's the real structural support.
But that's not coming.
Well, we'll continue to work with Josh, and I've had very strong, positive conversations with him. I'm not asking the federal government to extend JobKeeper. The reality is we have all worked towards that program finishing in March. And yes, we have different tax levers at a state and federal level, but ultimately we're all taxpayers. And we have an obligation as leaders through this pandemic to make sure we don't leave future generations with substantial debt. Every generation, every society has its challenges, but ultimately we have a role, and that is to set up society better for our kids and their kids.
And just finally, Ken Henry wrote a piece in the AFL last week. He says New South Wales has taken the lead on tax reform. It's primarily based around stamp duty. Just finally, house prices are off their rockers at the moment. They're just soaring. Has the whole stamp duty debate gone a bit quiet because you're making so much money out of it?
No, as I said, we'll put the economy before the budget. Governments shouldn't rely on rivers of gold from any tax revenue as a way of providing a quality service to their citizens. This is always, you can always argue there is not a good time to embark on reform. We've set down a course to go through a public consultation on a model. And we're working through that. And largely, I think there's been strong support for it because it's the absolute right decision. It's politically challenging and financially difficult. But at the moment, all states and the Commonwealth need to be focused on driving economic growth, not worrying too much about their budget position, particularly in an environment of low debt.
Just finally on Crown, is there any update there from your side of things? Do you expect them to eventually get their gambling licence? Because I read a stat this morning, you're missing out on about $400 million in revenue the longer that stays closed.
Yeah, well, that number's probably a bit higher. That's in the Herald today, but that issue pales into insignificance to the issues that need to be rectified by Crown. And they have challenges. I expect that Helen Coonan will work through those and resolve those with ILGA, but the ball's in their court, and they've got to satisfy the issues that have been raised in the Bergen inquiry.
Okay. New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, good to have you here. Thanks for the
Pete.
chat. Talk to you soon.